good? Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this third day of Excellentium2026 in Lyon. I really hope that you enjoyed yesterday's dinner and that you enjoyed speaking with the speakers, speaking with the participants, with all the LOTs, all the facilitators from the workshops also. Today we are going to talk about leading for impact. So it's the third pillar. We had leading yourself day 1, leading a team day 2, and leading for impact and a positive impact day 3. So you'll have the chance to actually attend even more panels and fireside chats and keynotes than the 2 previous days. You'll be able also to enjoy some social tours, social activities in the afternoon. So everyone who is doing the Sanofi visit is already aware through the Slack channel. You're already integrated in that Slack channel. So please, everyone who is doing Sanofi, please do the e-learning by 5 p.m. Otherwise, you won't be able to attend. It's super fast. It's less than 10 minutes. So do the e-learning. You have the link. It's in the Slack. Everyone who is doing Sanofi by 5 p.m. Okay. And please bring an ID. Everyone who is doing Sanofi tour. You'll be guided. So everyone, all the organizing team will escort you to the Sanofi tour, to the social activities that are happening in Place Bellecour, so you will be guided. And then we'll guide you to the dinner, to the cocktail afterwards at the Cactus cocktail. That is happening at 8 p.m. The cocktail is self-paced, so not covered by GBR like we have done for the previous cocktails. Also, I believe there is Anna, one of your members, one of the LOTs, she has prepared some form about memories, preparing a booklet memory about this event. So feel free to, if you feel so, fill out the form, and we will be able afterwards to share it. So that said, I believe it's now time to start the session today. So I'll leave the floor to Thomas to introduce our first keynote speaker. Thank you.
Hello everyone, can you hear me well? Yes? Wonderful. So our first speaker today, I don't think he needs an introduction, but for the few people who wouldn't know him, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sheeram Aradhye, the CMO and President of Development of Novartis. So Dr. Aradhye really had an amazing career path. He first started as a clinician and an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and then transitioned to industry. First at Novartis, and then in other biotech companies where he held multiple leadership roles. Since assuming his current role in 2022, he is responsible for the development of new medicines, ranging from the managing of the clinical trials until also the approval, the regulatory approval. All of this, of course, to bring new drugs to patients in need, of course. Him and his team are also responsible for the mid to long-term growth of Novartis. So in short, Dr. Aradhye is truly a leader of today who is actively working for the world of tomorrow, setting the stage, of course, for you, the leaders of tomorrow. Dr. Aradhye, it's truly a great honor to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Bonjour, good morning. What an amazing pleasure. It was just about 4 weeks ago when I read something from Jeff Bezos, who said something along the lines of the responsibility of a senior leader is to make sure that they spend their time in the future. that it is really important to make sure that somebody like me spends my time in the future while all the teams that work in my organization are making sure that we take care of the present. And I thought to myself, this is something really important. I must learn to do this better. And what better way to do that than to come and spend this morning with you all, because you are the future. And so I'm really honored to be with you all. And when I learned this morning that the primary mission of Excellentium as an organization is to reduce the gap and connect the dots between the leaders of the future with some of us that have been at it for a while, to see what it is that we can share with you. And I do this with the greatest of humility, because I have to say that sometimes I think one has to be so careful about starting to impart what one feels is wisdom, but doesn't necessarily mean it. But so let's see how we're going to spend the next hour together. I'm with you this morning until about 10. My plan is to share with you some details of what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis. And in the second part of a brief talk, share with you some of the learnings along the way of what has been a 25-year journey in the pharmaceutical industry and the biotech industry. So, pleasure to be with you all. Quite simply, I think of my life at the present time as being someone who has the opportunity, the privilege, the exciting gift of being able to turn molecules into medicines at scale. I think of this very simple paradigm that we think of molecules as coming from the research organization, where a good research organization is thinking about new targets in a disease area, identifying molecules that might engage those targets, evaluate how they might benefit and turn into medicines. But the ability to call a molecule a medicine comes from the fact that we generate evidence along the way that allows us, when we are done, to say, here is evidence generated on the back of well-conducted experiments, starting in the preclinical setting and moving into the most privileged of experiments, with its clinical trials in humans, to allow us in a regulated industry to say that here is evidence that this molecule, on the basis of the following benefit risk, has the right to be called a medicine to treat a particular disease. Once that is done, it is not enough. Because for that medicine to then make it to the patients whom we aim to serve, it needs to be accompanied by the ability for payers to pay for it, for prescribing physicians to understand any additional data that they might need to figure out how best to use it better. And all of that journey eventually gets our medicine to patients. And our ultimate goal is to achieve those patient outcomes, which I very simply think of as the trillions of moments in other human beings' lives that come closer to them being able to lead the kind of life that they aspire to live, not affected by a disease that might have afflicted them. That's the ultimate outcome. For the last 4 years, I wake up every morning, and I wake up in Basel, and I go to the Novartis campus. I happen to have an office near the building, near the river of the Rhine. And I, every morning, still ask myself that for a guy that at 25 years ago asked the question, and I'll talk about it later, I wonder what it would be like to have impact at scale. We're talking about leading for impact. The impact here is achieving patient outcomes that benefit people. Leading is the verb, that is an action that you all aspire to take, that I have the responsibility to take every day to make that happen. And I tell myself every morning, what an amazing gift. What an amazing opportunity to be able to get a chance to work in an organization. And the reason I share these numbers with you is to give you a sense of scale. And the two operative things there I want to tell you is that an R&D organization that invests, and money is an indicator of the amount of resource that goes into doing what is very, very difficult work. There is no other industry. You choose to become future leaders in the biotech world, you know that you're choosing to work in a space where, by definition, something that you start working on has a very, very small chance of actually working out. So the likelihood of success of a molecule becoming a drug is less than 1% when we start. When we get it into people, it has about a 10% chance of working. And there are very few other industries where you can actually make that kind of investment. But we do it because the potential reward when it works is extraordinary in terms of what it does for people, and from a business perspective, what it means for being able to return on the investments made. To give you an insight of when I came back to Novartis in 2022, we were about to go through a major transformation, which was that Novartis went from being a conglomerate, a company that had multiple different businesses, where we had an animal health business, we had an ophthalmology business, we had a vaccines business, we had a generics business. And over time, we decided that it actually makes sense to, instead of being a conglomerate of multiple businesses, be a single business that is purely focused on developing innovative medicines. And we spun off. The last thing to spin off was Sandoz, our generics business. And as if, for those of you that follow it, done fantastically well on its own as a focused generics company. And Novartis then became a focused innovative medicines company. I'm going to put a double point on the word focus. As you think about leading at scale, and if you think about leading for impact, we were a very, very good example of what it means when multiple competencies in an organization get focused on a few areas. For many years, Novartis was known as a company that had the most new drugs approved in any 5-year period. But some of our investors criticized us as being that, well, but none of them were necessarily really big drugs, as they would call it. And the impact they had was sometimes too small, or we got too distracted. And there was a big learning to think that focus might allow us to develop what we call compounding competencies. So the fact that all the way from research, development, commercial, and all the many other capabilities that are involved in that entire system, if you get focused on a particular therapeutic area, where you understand everything from the earliest stages of how that disease evolves to how best you commercialize the drug and get it to patients, and what will payers pay for, how do you secure access. That entire set of competencies then allows you to make better decisions and gives you the best shot at being the ones that can actually take a medicine and bring it to patients. And so when you think about the biotech world, which really is at the left end of that life's innovation supply chain that I told you, where bringing early molecules, new medicines, what pharma offers is that entire machine that has the greatest possibilities of bringing it to people. So we decided to get focused on 4 core therapeutic areas: cardiovascular, renal, and metabolic. So that's cardiovascular, oncology, immunology, and neuroscience. I know that sounds like, well, that's a lot of diseases, that's a lot of areas. But those 4 areas we've been present in for a long time. We know what we want to do. When you focus a strategy, you also have to be very clear on what you will not do. So for example, compared to some of the other people that you might have heard from, you don't see respiratory medicine here now. So we're not doing inhaled drugs anymore. We're not doing drugs in ophthalmology anymore. We then decided that in addition to small molecules, which are chemicals or biologics, we will deploy advanced platforms. So cell and gene therapies, radioligand therapies, which is precision delivery of radiation to cancer cells, and oligonucleotide-based therapies. So oligo-based therapeutics that directly target the genome and therefore have the ability to precisely address the source of a particular disease. As the 3 platforms that we will work on create all the competencies along the way. So if you think about radioligand therapeutics, where a radioligand therapeutic, there's no such thing as having a stock of the drug. You can't manufacture it and store it and ship it across the world. You actually need to produce it with the isotope exactly when a patient needs it and get it to a patient within the next 4 days for it to be delivered. We have figured out as a company how to do that on time, 99% of the time, for a drug called Pluvicto. So just an example of how those compounding competencies come together and why focus matters. So focus is an important operative word. I want you to remember it. We focus our attention on making sure that the evidence needs meet the US, Germany represents the European health technology assessment kind of markets, China and Japan. In the middle, you see the fact that a lot of this eventually is about people. This is the other theme for us today, which is when we talk about leading, a good question is, well, who do we lead? You talked about leading yourself because you have to look after yourself. You talked about leading teams, but it's people. Leading is a human phenomenon. And we have to keep that in mind. We'll talk about it some more. We are living in a world where the humans are now being essentially augmented by technology. And so we're going to have to talk about how do we deploy data and technology in ways that actually enable us to do the things we want to do better, faster, more successfully. The business we are in, and as you are a potential biotech leaders, and if you choose to stay in this space, the second operative word that I want to tell you in leading in this context is trust. Which is that there is absolutely no compromising on the fact that unlike most other businesses where trust is important, trust is invaluable in our business. Because what we work on, whether it's in a trial where another human being gives us consent to participate in the trial, or when somebody takes a medicine that we have produced, they expect that we live up to the trust that they place in us to say that I am sick, I want to feel better with your medicine, and therefore everything that happens in the context of that business must be driven by actions that can never violate that fundamental trust that people place in us. And then to get this done at scale on a sustainable basis, so that's the third word I'm going to tell you, which is that as a leader, you have to think about the fact that none of the work that we do is a short sprint. They are long, complex, I don't know, you might call them decathlons sometimes they may be triathlons, but they need sustaining, the ability to sustain. And so making sure that we can do it through a focus on excellence in operations, making sure that we remain productive. So, responsible use of capital and resources becomes important. And so that's the general theme of what this Novartis slide, by the way, hasn't changed for 4 years. This is how we're planning to work, and this is how we keep working. And so remaining consistent, but yet agile and responsive to your environment this was slightly different, by the way, in the 3 years that I spent in biotech. Biotech was a lot about solving for problems that emerge in a very resource-constrained setting, and it requires a different kind of skill. And I'm going to end here by telling you that at the end of it all, here are some examples of the impact that we're talking about. So when we say leading for impact, and when you think for yourselves, what is the impact that you hope to have? What I offer you is always keep in mind that the eventual impact is another person like us being able to live their life a little bit more like it should be, for as long as it should be, compared to what might have been had we had not been able to give them the medicine that we had produced. So whether it's Emily, so Emily was the first CAR T patient at the University of Pennsylvania where she got her CAR T that went on to become Kymriah, the first cell-based therapy that Novartis worked on. Matteo in the middle there is a child with spinal muscular atrophy who would have essentially not been able to walk and had a very limited life expectancy because of SMA, but that got his Zolgensma, which was our first gene therapy for SMA. Again, an innovation that was brought in through biotech innovation from a company called Avexis, but then became, through Novartis' resources, the first fully commercialized gene therapy made accessible all across the world. And what I feel especially proud of at a company like Novartis, that in addition to these very complex platforms that we work on, after 25 years of having made a drug called Coartem available at cost to sub-Saharan African patients for the treatment of malaria, we continue to innovate in a manner that allowed us to formulate Coartem, which is a very bitter medicine, by the way, in a formulation that can be given to a child that's less than 5 kilos. So if you imagine a mother in Africa whose infant develops malaria, you're kind of pretty much in the place where if you left them in the evening and you were back in the morning, you were not sure they were going to be around with falciparum malaria. But the fact that we're now able to deliver that Coartem to a child that's less than 5 kilos old, and they have a shot with a 1 or 2 dose treatment to be cured of malaria, becomes a huge benefit. And then behind all this, on the many, many diseases that we choose to treat, you can think of breast cancer, you can think of prostate cancer, you can think of a disease like chronic spontaneous urticaria, which is spontaneous wheals that appear and that result in severe itching and hives on your skin that prevent you from sleeping. And we just had a drug called Rapsido approved for chronic spontaneous urticaria. And I just heard from a patient who, after 10 years, they were able to sleep. So that's where I work. Now I'm going to share with you 4 or 5 key takeaways on my personal journey. So the first, by the way, that's me. Oh my God. Should I tell you how long ago that was? Yeah, I will. Actually, well before you were born. I can pretty much say that. So, so that behind me is my medical institute, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. That's me in med school, and that's probably in the late 80s, mid 80s. But as I've looked back, and I want to tell you that Steve Jobs said that the dots connect looking back. The important thing is, well, what do you do with that? Because you don't live your life looking back. You live your life looking ahead. So the process of looking back should be, what can I learn from the dots that connected to figure out what should I do in my dot today so that I might be able to connect it better tomorrow. So to that end, remember of your career as a lattice, not a ladder. It's not climbing it. It's actually building a picture in which remember that every experience that you are gaining or choosing to gain, think of it as actually building a diverse set of experiences that create a better picture over time than just a narrow ladder. I've now reached the age where I can look back and summarize my life and what seem to be themes in things like the 5 C's. So if you look back and said, okay, what got Sheeram to where he is? And I look back, I think of it as there were 5 values that I've chosen to live and continue to live that make the difference. That to be curious, to be competent, so you must build competence. You have to have courage so that you can take action in the face of the unknown. Nothing that happens that's meaningful is done alone, so you must learn to collaborate. And in a world that's becoming more and more technology focused, the thing that may remain in the domain of humans is compassion. And compassion to yourself and to the people around you, as you talked about leading teams, and towards the impact that you aim to have. When you try to bring that across in a large organization like mine, sometimes you have to think about how best will you communicate this concepts in a way that works. And so the one thing that we've come up with now is that all our work and all magic happens in landscape. And the reason I came up with that, and I want to share it with you, is that if you hold your phones up, all of us have one, we all live in a portrait identity. Organizations are organized in verticals, finance, HR, research, development, but all magic happens in landscape. And the ability as a leader to constantly be aware of how you're going to get people from committing to their portrait competency, but always remembering that it is in the service of the landscape, which is where molecules go on to become medicines to get to patients. And as an internal leader yourself, having the ability to do that is going to be at the heart of your success. The best manifestation of that came about when the Artemis crew came back, and I saw Christina Koch talking about her experience. She talked about what makes a team a crew. And she described the crew as a group, as she describes it there, as one that is stroking together every minute with the same purpose, willing to sacrifice silently for each other, that gives grace, that holds accountable, and it has the same cares and needs. So as you think of becoming a leader, ask yourself, how are you going to enable the teams that you're leading to become crews? This is my own Claude-based output of how I what I believe is currently happening, which is that in a rapidly changing world, I am now no longer sure whether I'm thinking or I'm thinking. And in your world, while you will lead humans, there is no question that you're going to lead humans that are going to be quite different in how they work and what they do with all the technology available to us. So please continue to reflect on it. And remember that at the end of all the technological advance, the thing that will matter even more is the human. And you will have to remember to stay focused on both your own humanity and those of the teams you'll meet. And to that end, I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite books called The Emperor of All Maladies, where remember that all the glorious descriptors and qualities that you ascribe to yourself as leaders will only be a reflection of those qualities manifest in even greater abundance by those we aim to serve. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take questions. Let's leave it on that. Do tell me your name.
Sure. Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm from Singapore, originally from India.
Nice.
Really inspiring journey. You talk about focus, people, and trust as being probably the company's vision of how drugs are developed and how you want to take the company forward. But what about your vision? How has that changed over the years? And has this always been for you, like focus, trust, people? Because you were a doctor, after all,
Yes,
who was treating patients, and then you made the plunge of not being with the patients, but on the other side of the spectrum. So how has that perspective evolved over the years?
No, very good. Thanks for that question. I remember the moment. So just to close out that story, I was a practicing transplant. I'm a nephrologist by training, and I was on the faculty at the University of Pennsylvania. I took care of my patients, one at a time. I was involved in clinical research, and the decision to transition. And it's very interesting that you use the phrase "the other side," and the interesting thing about it is that. People, when I went to industry, said, oh, now you crossed over to the dark side. And it's so interesting that it's ironic, actually, that the industry that actually works in the space that makes people's lives better ends up being the least trusted of industries. And I often wonder about why that is. And as you enter the world of biotech, and if you plan to become biotech leaders, keep that in mind, that distrust comes from when people don't live up to that expectation of what is expected for you as integrity. So the one thing I can tell you is that the idea of focus, the idea of the importance of trust that a patient's placed in me one-on-one, that has never changed. So what I'm very, very proud to say is that over 25 years in the industry, and certainly in my journey at Novartis, I have never felt once like I ever needed to compromise on that element of trust. As the chief medical officer of the company, by the way, on the executive committee, in fact, I am the single individual that takes the primary accountability for making sure that everything we do can stand up to the test of that trust. And I think what happens is, the principle we always live by, of course, is that it takes a long time to gain trust. It doesn't take a long time to lose it. That's true of life, by the way. Yeah? In the back?
Hi, my name is Avantika. I'm from the US. I appreciated kind of your AI slide where you had AI in the think portion. And I am curious, given kind of, your career journey and now like AI coming up and being more, intertwined with pharma and the value chain and such, how do you kind of ensure the use of AI where they're using it for, workflow efficiency, of course, but how do you ensure personally that you're not outsourcing too much of your cognitive power to AI and ensuring that, yes, you're using it for the right things, but like what concerns do you also have around
Yeah.
beyond kind of the
Yeah.
data governance portion of it. Yes, the data
Yeah.
should be good and unbiased, but what concerns come to mind with the continued use or extended use of AI?
So maybe I'll give you the question in two parts. So let me first start with the work that happens on the drug development side. So we talk about AI for the use of discovery, which is one element, but when it comes to development, which is a regulated expectation that you have the ability to demonstrate the source of the information, validating it, all the expectations of a 21 CFR compliant system. So all of our workflows, we have to make sure that we are setting them in the way that the use of agents or whatever is happening still meets the standards for how you will be able to demonstrate that they were appropriately being used. So that's number one. So it is a very difficult and important, but an important responsibility. So in parallel to all the growth that is happening, there is an equal and a little bit of discovering along the way, but being cautious and sometimes holding back a little bit from not getting to the most advanced or expected use of the AI until we have thought about precisely where it'll fit. The most important principle is that it is always human in the loop. I now think of it as a human above the loop, but that cannot be a perfunctory statement. It cannot be where a human in 15 seconds, supposedly in the loop, is signing off on something that the machine does in seconds. So how do you engage the workflows in a manner that actually involve human interaction in a manner that assures engagement and human judgment is a very important, and we don't have all the answers, by the way. So this is something that is evolving as we go along. As an individual, I can tell you that on my own journey, I have used it mostly in my personal journey as a cognitive partner. I discovered just about 2 weeks ago that there is something very asymmetrical about a cognitive partner that never gets tired, but I do. and so I realized that since I live with this curiosity thing, well, now I can answer 27 things in the course of 3 minutes, but then I have to read. So I'm sort of being very aware now for the responsibility of how do I effectively deploy that AI into enabling me to make better decisions actually requires a level of discipline and thinking in itself. In general, at an organizational level, automation aside, I think of AI as augmenting intelligence. So in my mind, I think of AI as augmenting intelligence for accelerating impact. And the intelligence we are augmenting is human intelligence, and the augmentation is expected to be manifest as the humans doing the things that they currently may not have had the time to do. Now, the thing I have to tell you is that also takes very conscious discipline, which is you can't just say that I'll free up more time, but then if you use it for doing more of the same, well, that may not be the best use of its time. And the final question you asked, I actually don't have an answer to, because that actually is going to be your life, which is I'll probably get away with the fact that I spent 25 years building my cognitive judgment. It's not just my hope, I'm almost certain that you all will develop the same judgment that is the human element, but you will get to it in a different way and possibly at a whole different level than what I was able to. And that's my hope for you. Where do we want to go? Want to go this side?
Hi, thank you very much for your time. Victor from the CNBD team supporting Susanne Kreutz.
Yes. Of course.
Mentioning impact, you've mentioned the global health team providing medicines at cost, such as Coartem. Yesterday in a panel, we had a question about, is pharma financially driven? And someone from Sanofi said, yes, but this is what fuels innovation. What is your view on this?
That's a very good question. I have to say that it became clear to me in the 3 years that I was away in biotech, where the sheer responsibility of the responsible use of the capital that investors in the little biotech had given us and what was necessary for us to move things forward, and the discipline came to it. So I have a very simple view. Remember that slide that I showed you where the getting to patients part, if it is not able to be done in a financially viable manner that returns give returns to people who invest in this industry, it's not going to be a sustainable story. And so my view is that there is a certain honest reality to the fact that there is different being financially driven and from being inappropriately, greedily, disingenuous, misbehaving, whatever, right? So that's the point. So I do think that without capital, there's no progress. By the way, nobody says that about the tech industry. They are too. I don't know, don't wait for me. Please just give the mic to people. Feel free to.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Yes. You mean that somebody lost trust in me? Yeah, I'll give you an example. I will give you an example of where the loss of trust would have been. I trust Sheeram to have my best interest at heart, as somebody who leads me, and I'm on his team. And it would have happened in a setting where, in an interaction, and this is an important responsibility, by the way, for a leader, is that because you're the leader, your actions cast a longer shadow than they normally would. And so in a moment when I would have lost as much self-awareness or intentionality, and that I might have in a discussion where the discussion is a little asymmetric, not watched the fact that my intelligence was turning into a weapon, because in the moment I was planning on winning this argument and making a team member feel in a way that I wouldn't have wanted them to. So they lost their sense of psychological safety around me. I have to tell you that it is very difficult to be able to keep doing that sustainably for an extended period of time. And there are times when that happens. And the only solution for it is the ability to authentically acknowledge and sincerely reflect the fact that I don't say, by the way, that it was not my intention and I wish that that hadn't happened. I own it and I say that I failed in my awareness to be able to live up to your trust in me that I will behave a certain way and that I will do better. But yeah.
Okay. Hello, my name is Anna. I am working with Boehringer Ingelheim in Vienna. And my question was about not AI, but are there any other technologies or concepts that you think will have the major impact in the future?
I mean, look, all those things that I told you about, those advanced platforms, we talked about CAR-T. We go from talking about CAR-Ts that were breaking out people's cells and modifying them and putting them back. Now we start talking about in vivo CAR-Ts where we're able to introduce. So the technologies that are evolving at a rapid pace on how we will introduce and be able to do things that we previously could not, there are far too many to count. But I do think that my hope is that the real transformation is going to come when we are able to deploy the AI elements to being able to understand biology. And I don't think it's going to be as fast as people say that in 10 years we're going to solve every disease. I just don't think that's realistic. But I do think that the ability to fundamentally understand biology in ways that was previously not possible is where I think the biggest impact will come. And you're seeing those investments happening now. But I always remind people that once you understand the disease and you have a hypothesis, the fact that we still test it in people, I think of it as many things showing up at a 3-lane highway now, which is my drug development story. And how am I going to get that done? But we'll see.
Good morning, I'm
Hi.
Susie, I'm from Singapore.
Hi.
My question is, how do you drive motivation and performance when the impact or the outcome on patients is often quite long-term or further much in the future? Thank you.
That's interesting. You raise a we describe it as the purpose we discuss is actually, yeah, you're right, it's very far in the future. What drives you every day is what you experience on a day-to-day basis. And I believe, and we believe, that that comes from creating a work environment where people feel a sense of autonomy and empowerment and recognition. Because just thinking about what I'm going to achieve 8 years from now, I mean, if you're in a research lab, or we will just read out some trials this year that have been running for 7 years. When they read out, they may be positive or negative, but the pride that comes from having done every day that which is your responsibility to the best of your ability and being acknowledged for it with a sense of empowerment and autonomy is how I would say we maintain it. You want to go there? Are you close? And then here.
Thank you. Joella from Oxford and Novo Nordisk. And I really appreciated that you started with your commitment to bridging this gap and contributing to the future. And it resonated with us who think there is this, big gap still existing. We want to fill it. But what else should we be aware of that leaders like you are doing, leaders at Novartis are doing, to be closer to young researchers, innovators, med students who have those ambitions, but who think that maybe falsely that they have to climb the ladder to reach there very late. So what should we be more aware of and build that symbiotic relationship more effectively?
Well, I would say to you that if I look back, one thing I would say to you is that please don't think that something might get too late. Have the sense of urgency that you have, but equally recognize that there is time to get stuff done from where you are. You'll have lots of opportunity to get things done, and I really think that the thing I didn't speak about was that the fundamental driver of success. And maybe I'll give you an example. My life turned out this way. After I came to America in 1937 years ago, in 1989, after having trained in medicine in India. It was a time when the US wasn't giving visas for people to come and interview. I got my fellowship on a telephone call. I was offered the fellowship with no money. And I remember tearing up the letter, and my girlfriend, then my wife now, said, we'll work it out. If you can't get funding, then who can? And we're going to figure it out. And I think this idea that if you have the confidence in your capabilities, you're committed to building the competence, the fact that you will figure it out is probably a good place to be. And to this day, I think of my own sort of personal goal and my personal vision to say that I keep wanting to learn so that I am prepared to embrace what the universe is yet to unfold. Because eventually there is no finish line.
Hello, I'm Sakina, originally from India, currently based in Oxford. You talk about reaching patients at scale and helping them. Coming from AIMS, where the patient volume probably is like more than 100 a day, how or what was that key moment that led you to decide that you would want to help them from the drug development aspect rather than from treating them directly and having that interaction with them much more closely?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yes, so the training at AIM, it came much after. So I literally think that when I made the decision, the question was exactly the way you phrased it, which is, I wonder, I had done, and some of it, by the way, comes from the fact that when you do something on every day, independent of how complicated or complex it is, and I was taking care of I was a nephrologist, that's a complicated specialty, of very complicated things all day long. A little bit of that curiosity part is that, now it's kind of boring. I was emotionally very vested in what I used to do as a doctor one-on-one with my patients. But I did wonder, and I think I wondered because I got exposed to people who had made alternate choices. My wife's a physician scientist who went off to McKinsey and became a businesswoman, whatever. And so I met a lot of people, and I thought, when somebody came and asked me, would you like to speak to the person at Novartis about this new transplant drug that's coming, and they would like a transplant specialist to come and help them with it internally, I had enough curiosity to say, let me have the conversation. And literally one thing led to another. And when I left with a complete assurance that my position at Penn was open for the following 2 years for me to return to it anytime I wanted. But I honestly have to say that not once in the 25 years have I thought to myself, do I need to go back? And I know that many people have asked me that question because they found it, they were not sure how would they deal with having lost that deep respect that they had as their doctor with their patients, and how does it feel? Because I never felt once that I wasn't any longer helping people. I just was realizing that I'm doing it on a time scale that is much different than the 1 hour interaction I would have with an individual patient to solve their problem in the moment myself, versus the idea that turning something into a medicine is a journey that involves hundreds of people over, and hundreds of patients over a period of time. And then when it is successful, it makes a difference. So for example, I'm a nephrologist. I had the great fortune of working on what became the first oral drug for MS. I headed up neuroscience at one point in my life. And so, but I also take it with a sense of humility. It's sort of very important to keep in mind that, there's not this, I'm the doctor.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Katarina, originally from Slovenia, currently living in Germany, and thank you so much for leaving ample time for a discussion.
Yes.
I have a question in this very much evolving landscape of technologies, geopolitical problems like AI. How do you find your pillars, or what are your superpowers to run the marathons, triathlons through drug discovery and development process?
Yeah, you accurately described the, it's very interesting. So if I kind of think of the radar and the rudder. The radar right now is bringing across so many foreign objects, whether it's geopolitics, MFN, AI, how are you changing this, what's happening, what's pricing, whatever. But the rudder, which is holding course, is coming from the very simple, unchanged primary mission, which is how do you develop transformative medicines efficiently, literally. So I literally anchor the whole organization back around me and myself on saying a lot of things could be happening and a lot of things may happen, and there are a lot of what ifs, and how do we prepare for, and how do we prepare for scenario A through Z. But then at the end of it, what anchors you is, and so so there is a wonderful, I take photographs as a hobby, and oh, by the way, I have an Instagram. Is that a shameless pitch? Sheeram Aradhye photography, which I can digress for 1 second and tell you that photography became the vehicle for the personal leadership journey, which is the art of being present and sensing and observing, and not being in the picture yourself. But there's a beautiful image I have, which is that when you're walking on a bridge in the fog, where the path isn't clear and you don't know whether the bridge is still there, the only thing you can do is take the next secure step. And this phenomenon is happening continuously right now in a very threatening, evolving world where you can never be paralyzed in place. You must move. I hope that helps.
Hello, I'm Rosa from Peru, and thank you for your talk. And you mentioned that impact and scale is not an individual deliverable. But what about our own professional path, which we have to build largely on our own? How do we stop that solo mindset from limiting our impact?
I'm trying to see if I understood your. Was your question that what can you do as an individual? I see what you mean. That no, okay, no. So I think what I was saying was that large-scale impact or impact that's. I'll give you the difference. I was thinking this morning as I was coming in as to what the metaphor is. If you think if your chosen profession was to be a sculptor or an artist, you would impact this world, but purely based on your own skill of how beautiful the statue that you produce it. Michelangelo had an impact on the world, but he did it based on his own individual personal skill set. It was his core capability. The work that you have chosen to do, which is if you all want to be biotech leaders of the future, or if you want to enter this space, you are going to bring the equivalent of your ability to sculpt, but in itself, it's not going to be sufficient for what it's going to mean for turning that into the future. So you have to, that's what I meant, which is that you have to still be committed to building. If you are a discovery scientist or if you are a regulatory professional, you have to build your own competencies, but recognize that in isolation, they may not have enough value. They have to be connected with other people who get things done in an organizational setting.
All right, I think you're done.
How are they?
So
Thomas?
Let's give a warm welcome, warm applause for Dr. Aradhye.
All right. By the way, I'm going to go off script and tell you that stay finely tuned to hearing from one of the most impactful leaders in this space. I see Hervé sitting in the back. Hervé is an old colleague, Novartis Oncology for many years. So you guys are going to learn a lot. Bye, hi Hervé, I got to run, but.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye, Thomas. Thanks. Thank you so much. We'll go up.